Time now to take a look at what's grabbing the headlines here in France. We're joined on set by Florence Villeminot. Morning to you, Flo. Now, for weeks now, we've been talking about this labour reform bill, of course, the El Khomri law, and it's set to kick off a marathon of parliamentary debates today.
That's right, and there is a clever play on words in the press today. Let's take a look at the front page of L'Humanité, the communist paper. It says that, you can see here, Parliament is going to be up all night debating this reform. Of course, this reform sparked several protests across the country, including the Nuit debout, the Up All Night movement. So hence the play on words here. It's far from a done deal, according to L'Humanité. MPs have filed 5,000 amendments, so they might be up all night, effectively.
Crikey. Well, the Labour Minister, Miriam El Khomri, is defending her project in an interview in Le Parisien today, isn't she?
That's right. Very hardly defending her law here. You can see this quote from the interview: "Must we give in to the pressure from the streets? No." So you can see her here defiant. Let's take a look inside Le Parisien aujourd'hui en France. Similar play on words, but this time it's El Khomri who is going to be up all night defending her law. Definitely the joke of the day here. The suspense is high, though. Is the government going to hold tight, or is it going to cave in and essentially be forced to eat humble pie? Well, if we take a closer look at the cartoon there in Le Parisien, you can see the Prime Minister Manuel Valls holding the reform, saying, are we actually going to have to eat this reform? And meanwhile, François Hollande there saying, well, I haven't finished eating the failed reform to strip dual nationals convicted of terrorism of their nationality. You might remember that reform as well. We talked about it for months. And in the end, the government decided to scrap it.
Well, it's true that those reforms have already been watered down quite a bit since they initially arrived on this stage. And La Croix has been taking a closer look at what remains.
That's right. La Croix says, there are so many changes that have been made to the law already before it even goes through Parliament. You can see, does this labor law, does it even still make sense? It's quite confusing. Now, initially, the law was supposed to make things more flexible, to boost hiring, but all these changes are confusing. What is the point of this reform in the end? All it's done is upset everyone. Nobody is happy with this law, according to La Croix. Les Echos, the business paper, says that this law has really turned into a farce, actually. With these 5,000 amendments that have been filed, it's going to essentially turn into a fistfight in Parliament. It's going to make a spectacle of democracy and the socialist majority, according to Les Echos. Enough is enough. It's time to put an end to playtime here, according to Les Echos. And it calls on the government to effectively push the reform through Parliament. There is a loophole in the French Constitution. It's called the 49.3. We're maybe going to be talking more about it in the days and weeks to come. Essentially allows the government to just push a law through Parliament regardless of the vote. And so Les Echos says that is exactly what the government needs to do, use the 49.3 in the name of public order and the interest of French businesses.
I imagine we're going to be talking about this an awful lot throughout the day. But for now, let's move on to a different story. In the left-leaning daily, Libération has been lashing out against the high wages of French CEOs.
That's right. Let's take a look at the front page of Libé. It calls it an affront and essentially an insult to the people. It's indecent. If we take a closer look inside, you can see they talk about Merci Patron. Now, Merci Patron is the name of a satirical documentary that French media has been talking a lot about. It's by François Ruffin, one of the leaders of the Nuit debout movement. Now, when François Hollande was running for president back in 2012, he vowed to fight for more moderation in the compensation of big CEOs. It seems, though, that this is another campaign promise that he's broken. You can see just a couple of examples here. The man in the middle there is Carlos Ghosn, the CEO of Renault-Nissan. We've been talking about him in the last couple of days. He made a total of 15 million euros last year, but that's a figure, quite a lot of money. But that's a sum that actually the board of investors is having a hard time stomaching. And actually, last Friday, a majority of investors rejected this, a first time in France. And Libération says that this shows a growing feeling of exasperation in France in general, exasperation towards the lack of transparency as to just why these CEOs make so much money. For instance, what qualities justify this kind of compensation?
Well, as soon as we find them out, let me know. But this is all coming, of course, as Libération is commemorating the 80th anniversary of the election of a left-wing government, a government that put in place some radical social change.
That's right. This is the Front Populaire, the Popular Front, a coalition of left-wing parties, including the Socialists and the Communists, that came to power on the 3rd of May, 1936. It's a mythical alliance in France that was led by Léon Blum, made a huge mark on French history. Still feel the traces of the Front National, the Front Populaire, very different.
Let's not
different
confuse
parties.
those
Sorry.
two.
Slip of my tongue there. The Front Populaire fought for things like paid holidays, workers' rights, etc. So you can see here Libération paying tribute to the Front Populaire and its legacy. But just to end this press review with a random story that caught my eye and some pretty good photos. Let's take a look at Le Parisien today. You can see this series of photos of French presidents and politicians wearing quite ridiculous garbs here. You can see Manuel Valls there, the prime minister. He was visiting New Caledonia on Sunday, and he was caught while he was forced or agreed to wear this hat with made of flowers, etc. It's a traditional hat. Le Parisien wonders why French politicians ridicule themselves in such a way. It's a trap. The flowered crown or a collar is it's a trap, according to Le Parisien. But it's actually hard to turn down this offer to wear these traditional garbs. It's kind of impolite not to. So they don't really have much of a choice. But it does lead to these great photos of our politicians.
Oh my goodness, that's certainly something an image that is going to be difficult to erase from the mind. Thanks very much, Florence Villeminot, taking us through the press this morning. Flo's back.